Labadiena, and welcome to my messy workshop. In this episode, I'm gonna be building a steel reception, or maybe I should say reception looking like made out of steel. Well, anyway, first of all, I would like to briefly talk about the creative process coming up to the design like that. When the client approaches me with a drawing, it's all clear and done. But sometimes the client comes up to me with just an idea without any drawing or certain furniture concept. So then we have to go through a little bit of a process. I have to extract some constraints about the furniture in order to be able to manufacture it. So first of all, I ask for dimensions. That's pretty obvious. Once I have those, I ask about the utility of the furniture. So for this one, the client explained that it will be the main furniture upon entry, so it will have to be like a reception. Even though it's not like a hotel reception, it has a bit of a different purpose, but nevertheless there will be some tables behind it and some electronics like computers and etc. So then I ask about the material choices, and I'm glad the client was really decisive on this one, and she explained that she wants the furniture to look like made out of steel. Plus she added that the shape of it has to be rather soft, so the corners have to be curved. So I had these constraints, and the furniture was getting to some consolidation, and then I suggested for the client that maybe we should make the furniture modular, so if she will move to another place, she would be able to move it with her and modulate according to the new space. Plus, it will be a lot easier for me to manufacture and bring it in to the client's place. So yeah, she agreed on that. She said that it's a wonderful idea. So that was about it. I had enough constraints to start building the furniture. So let's dive in. I decided to make a substructure from the cheapest materials I could get my hands on, which ended up being this chipboard, which came as a bottom of a pallet, and this material cost me nothing. I just had to make sure to remove the staples and screws, not to dull my blade, but yeah, I missed some, so I did dull my blade. Well, anyway, so this material is structurally sound and it's perfect for this application, since nobody gonna see the inside of the furniture and nobody cares. And the process of cutting is fairly simple. I tried to cut all of the pieces at once, so all of the dimensions would be equal, because like I mentioned, this piece of furniture will be modular and it has to connect, so the thicknesses have to be exactly the same. Anyway, it didn't take long to prepare the pieces, and I've started assembly, which is also pretty straightforward. I'm just using polyurethane glue and some staples. This process goes super quickly, and if you pay attention, you can see that I'm using corner pieces, and these are just for temporary use, so to speak, just because this structure is very wobbly until I put the front panel, which ties everything together. So those corner pieces are just for that reason. And I've cut the front panels only after I made the frames. Just because I'm working without any drawings, I don't feel I have to make the drawing for such a simple build. So I tend to cut some pieces after I have the exact dimensions, and I don't have to do the math excluding or including the thicknesses of the material, etc. So it's just the way my brain works, and that's the way I build stuff. So the square boxes or square structures were done, and I moved on making the curved pieces, the corner pieces. So I decided to cut all of the pieces at once, So I screw these together, drew the curvature, and use my bandsaw to cut the shape. Of course, I had to smooth the transition, and when I started to unscrewing the pieces, I realized that there might be some inconsistencies because it was cut by hand. So I marked the sides so all of these would line up in the same orientation and the curvature would match perfectly. The rest was just a matter of repeating the assembly process, and to form the curvature I needed to create some structure for the bend to be able to rest on something. So I used every single bit of the scrap material I had. So these are the standoffs from the pallet I talked at the beginning of the video. So these standoffs were made in the factory, just a bunch of 12 mil chipboard stacked together. So I had to remove some nails and it was good to go. So even though this material was very thin and flexy, I had plenty of those, so it wasn't a problem. I placed it pretty tightly and it created this substructure for the bend to happen. And to form the curve, I'm using this cabinet back panel. I'm not really sure how this stuff is called in English, but basically it's like an 4mm MDF. So I prepared the sheets and I thinned these down on my white belt sander just so the curvature, it would be easier to bend the material because the radius was quite tight, as you saw. To secure this sheet on the structure, I'm using the same polyurethane glue and staples. The only problem I was facing is that there was too much pressure on my air system and the staples were going through the material. So I adjusted it for a couple of times until I dialed it in perfectly, and the rest was fairly easy and it took no time to make these curves. The only downside was that the material was only maybe 2.5 millimeters in thickness, and it was fairly easy to poke a hole through it. So I decided to add some foam from the inside, which made it a bit more rigid and removed this drum effect, if you will. So the structure just became a bit more sound and stable. After the glue and foam has set, I removed the protruding staples. I added some more if needed. Patched the holes with some automotive putty, basically making the curvature as perfect as it gets. I'm gonna repeat myself one more time that I'm working without any drawings, so that means I didn't know the exact location of the inner line I'm marking now, and I was able to determine that only after I made the curve. And now I'm making I'm removing that extra material and making the inside line flush and even. The very last bits to add were these tiny pieces. These will go down to the table where the table gonna sit, just to cover up the insides, and this will also be dressed up in steel, so the whole furniture will be very uniform and it would tie together nicely. At least I hope. I mean, I already know it will. Finally, the subframe was finished and it was time to move onto the steel preparation. So this is just a regular 0.5 millimeter steel tin covered with zinc. I'm just now degreasing it because it was covered with some sort of grease for safe storage, I believe. And the Sewer's tape measure comes in handy once in a while. And the rest of the process is really self-explanatory. I will just cut the material to size and glue it onto the pieces. In order to make the lines crisp, I'm gluing the sheet metal a little bit oversized because I will be trimming the excess material away with just a regular flush trim router bit. And yes, you have to dedicate the router bit for this procedure because the bit will no longer be suitable for wood, but that's okay. Those are fairly cheap, and I'm okay with that. And I will mention that this procedure was really nasty. I had to use all of the PPE I had, and even though I was trimming with the vacuum cleaner hooked up to the router, I still was getting a lot of shrapnels in my face, in my hair, in my pockets, gloves, shoes, everywhere. And those are really nasty ones because they are very sharp and they stick into the skin. Anyhow, in the spots where I couldn't reach with the router, I used a file, and this worked out, even though it was a bit more time consuming. And this thin glue up was fairly annoying, mainly because I had to do it in 3 stages. I wasn't able to glue all of the sides because I had to do that trimming in between the glue ups. So finally it's the last glue up, and I'm really glad. And here you can see the brand I'm using, the glue brand I'm using. I highly recommend it. It's really high quality stuff. It can stick basically anything to anything. It's graded for the marine use, so I'm pretty sure it's good enough. I will try to find the link and I will leave it in the description. The best thing about this wooden router bit is that it's fairly long and the material is only 0.5 millimeter in thickness, so when one part of the bit gets dull, I can simply move the bit up or down and use it with a fresh cutting knife. Even though I've tried to make the pieces as precise as possible, I'm not naive to think that these will line up absolutely perfect. So that's why I bought a small can of silver paint, and I'm painting all of the meeting edges. So if the pieces will not line up absolutely perfect, you will not be able to see the inconsistencies because the color will be so similar. And I've also painted all of the exposed edges, which will be visible. This next step is not entirely necessary, but I decided to sand all of the sides with 220 grit, removing most of the zinc away and creating this interesting looking patina. And after the sanding, I decided to scuff everything with a Scotch-Brite to bring some sheen back into the piece, and also I applied a little bit of bronze powder. That was basically an experiment. I didn't know how will it work, but I think it left a little bit of golden sheen to the pieces. Though when I asked my colleagues can they spot the difference, they said that there's no difference with or without that bronze powder. So I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just imagining this golden effect. Maybe not. And because I have removed the protective layer of zinc, the steel became exposed to the environment, and if you would place your hand on such furniture, you would immediately be left with a finger mark because of instant corrosion. So I had to protect the steel, so I decided to use this industrial polyurethane lacquer. I applied a couple of coats and that made the trick. Initially I wasn't planning to make a skirt and kind of a standoff on the bottom of the furniture, but I had to do it because I missed the measurement, I missed the height of the table. So I realized the table will not fit under the furniture, so I had to create a bit of a skirt under it. And finally the furniture is finished, and it's the delivery day. Usually these days are rather stressful, but this piece of furniture came together without any stress. Okay guys, this was quite a long video. Sincerely thank you for sticking with me, and I really hope to see you soon. Bye bye.